So it goes something like this. It is the self that is viewed not only by me, but by all those who meet me that define who I am. This is the resounding idea in most systems of astrology, that the ascendant or the first house rules both our own appearance and the impressions that we make on other people. The idea being that what I define as me is similar to the me that the world sees when they meet me. And whilst I don't completely disagree, I do have an argument to make, so please bear with me. The word locus is used in the system of geometry to describe a location or place, which are determined by specific conditions. The same use of the word can be applied to planets, houses, decans, and points in the natal birth chart, all with their own set of specified conditions. However, all these values are designed to add up to one thing, one whole true value. Of course, in order to get there, we need to look at all the values present that can help us reach an outcome. But here is where I believe that many make the mistake in astrology of seeing many aspects of the natal birth chart as separate segments. Now, before you say that's not you and you find something else to watch, I'm willing to bet that you believe the ascendant is the main contribution to your appearance and everything else is just a mild influence. This can be drummed up to the way that natal birth charts are drawn up, dividing up the houses and usually being spoken about separately. So I don't blame you if you do read your natal chart this way, but I'm going to try and show you why there are actually 4 main points in your natal chart that contribute to your overall impression on the global stage. So the notion that the first house rules over our appearance isn't wrong. However, it is projected rather than seen. In esoteric astrology, we can explain the first house, which comes under the rulership of Aries, and the first ray of willpower as the forceful will of our soul's intention into the physical space. This is where the influences of the zodiac and planets present or aspects in the first house become a part of the story the soul is attempting to tell, the superficial ego, in the hopes that it realizes this. So regardless if there are planets present or aspecting from elsewhere in the chart, these all form the basis of self-expression into the space that we occupy. For this reason, Mars rules over the cardinal angular house of the first segment of the chart, as Mars is the planet that deals with the expression of willpower and devotion. In Theosophy, Mars deals with the cosmic power of universal intent, referred to by Theosophists as Forhat. So then, of course, it stands to reason that because of this, the vessel used by this natural force has to be physical in order to have an impact on the physical world. This is why the first house plays the role of the paintbrush, painting the intention of the soul onto the canvas of life. In Vedic astrology, Mars is called Mangala and is a greater malefic, as it is this intention which is seen as a slight against the pure state of universal will. The idea being that where there are ways around, Mars prefers to go right through it. However, esoteric astrology sees this as a necessary expression for activity within our world and our solar system. So if you're still with me so far, then let us take it further. The esoteric ruler of the first house is Mercury. Mercury plays the role of being the messenger for cosmic intention through thought and ideas, as it is Mercury that rules over the central nervous system, allowing for more complex action to be brought out. So it is the safe bet then to assume that Mercury would start at the head where the brain is. And why Aries is represented by a ram, the horns being the measure of Mars exerting its will on our world. However, an artist who is attempting to paint a rainbow won't use the color black. The artist would need the right colors to express his, hers, or their intention. So planets and aspects infused energy would need the right tools to express themselves, and why the signs and planets present would lean the native towards a certain look, helping the native express these energies into their life story. However, this is just the start. The famous Hollywood actress Marilyn Monroe had Black Moon Lilith conjuncting her ascendant in her natal chart, and this is something she is well known for. So of course Lilith sitting in the first house so close to the ascendant shows her energy through Marilyn's physical expressions and movement of her body, the way in which she gracefully walks but with a whole lot of fierceness in it at the same time. Citing the role of Mercury and Mercury's control over the central nervous system, as it is the central nervous system which uses and influences our actual expression into the physical world.
Why don't you ever get a dress like that?
Listen, for a dress like that, you've got to start laying plans when you're about 13.
So to sum up this chapter, the first house is our outward expression, and the energies present are very much a part of what we define ourselves as. However, this is one part of the complex puzzle that defines us and how we are viewed by those around us. The next major contribution is seen through the role of the IC or Imam Coeli. In traditional astrology, this is ruled over by the cardinal angular fourth house of Cancer and sits at the cusp of the fourth house. Now, the traditional interpretation of this house is signified in our family values and upbringing. So in the Jyotish chart, the fourth house is buried away near the center of the chart, showcasing the nature of the nurture and security that this house rules over. The traditional ruler of this house is the moon, as here we see the emotional nurturing nature of the moon's influence. In esoteric astrology, the fourth house represents the point of manifestation and incarnation, as the soul physically manifests through the driving factors of its environment, and why Cancer deals with the third ray of active intelligence and the seventh ray of ceremonial order, which is ruled over by the lunar influences of the house ruler. The moon controls the lines of receptivity as the sun's light is incubated and reflected onto the earth. This is why the moon is at the heart of many ceremonial and group rituals, and why the moon plays a role in bringing the soul into being in the fourth house, attaching the soul to the conscious lines of communication rather than the subconscious. So to put it bluntly, the fourth house rules over how we see the world. These core drives shape out the environmental changes that we experience through our growing phases. It is also a known fact that, aside from genes, the environment itself affects facial morphology. The esoteric ruler of Cancer and the fourth house is the planet Neptune. This mysterious and aloof planet is the planet that deals with the cosmic currents and imagination. It is Neptune that toys with the abstract ideas emanating from the subconscious and places them into the physical space to be acted upon. So with Neptune and the moon working in tandem together, we see the motherly nature being expressed as both the birthing, nurture and cosmic dream in which the incarnated soul follows until fully recognized, holding the soul in the bosom of its cosmic environment and influences its spiritual roots, effecting its external expression. So this is why, when we look at the fourth house and aspects to it, we note these very aspects in ourselves, not just on a very deep emotional level, but they physically manifest as well in our own appearance. So logically, this house is associated with genetic and cultural heritage, and when we look at famous families, a striking pattern starts to emerge. For example, with the British royal family, especially the current reigning monarch and her children, of which the majority have either earth or water elements sitting where their MC or IC are situated. There are many reasons behind how society comes to be: laws, agreements, philosophical worldviews. However, these are formed through union. One mind communicates an idea into another. In traditional astrology, Mercury rules over communication. However, the desire to connect oneself to someone else must first exist, which is an essential experience and in one way or another requires surrender to do so. This is where the role of the cardinal angular seventh house comes into play, traditionally ruled over by the sensuous planet of Venus. In Vedic astrology, Venus is associated with the goddess Lakshmi, but also referred to as Shukra, which basically terms the word for seminal fluid excreted during moments of pleasure, symbolizing the process used to unify oneself to another, though this doesn't have to refer strictly to the more physical display. So chimpanzees and primates use their bodies more than audio-sensory sound to communicate, otherwise referred to as body language. For this to happen, the body must possess the right energetic pathways to display such intention. This is where the esoteric ruler of Libra and the 7th house starts to influence this very delicate stage, using a touch of finesse within this cardinal ruled segment. For this reason, Libra deals with the aesthetics of physical form and provides the balance needed to exercise our will into the physical and beyond. But because this house deals with relationships, I can't progress without pointing out the polarity which exists between the self, or the 1st house, and the 7th house, as the 1st house expresses the self through the 7th house more so than any other, and vice versa. Should there be any planets present or aspecting the 7th house, these will be seen in your appearance, as your soul needs these influences to reach out and form a connection to the world beyond the physical limitations of the body. All of these houses mentioned are part of the cardinal cross of matter and represent the stage of initiation of energy. I'm sure by now you know where I'm going with this and where we'll end up, but before we do that, I need to touch on something that will help bring this together later. In Jyotish astrology, the 9th divisional chart is a subdivision of the 9th house. Using the nakshatras or lunar mansions in the natal chart, the 9th division chart focuses on the 9th house, as the house represents our philosophical, religious and higher learning. In layman's terms, one would call this chart showing who we grow up into, and it starts right after our birth. This chart is seen by many Vedic astrologers as the most important because it depicts a more accurate prediction of our lives. The 9th house is ruled by Jupiter or Brahaspati and even called the Deva god Indra. Jupiter is the planet that deals with our spiritual lessons and expansion. Hence, the 9th house represents the person we grow into through lessons that become or that we develop and expand into. When we actually look at the 9th divisional chart, a lot changes. A good way of understanding the difference between the D9 chart and your natal chart is that the natal chart represents your primal drives in life, whereas the D9 chart represents what we become in this life. Now that we've got that out of the way, let's start drawing this up to a conclusion by dealing with the final chapter of this video. Traditional astrology describes the 10th house as the house that deals with career and public image. I think the latter description is by far the most important aspect of this house, because the 10th house pulls from the same polarity as the 4th house, which deals with how we view the world. The 10th house is how we act within the world based on these views. The reason for this is because Saturn rules over this segment of the chart. Saturn is the planet that deals with delays and restrictions. However, in esoteric astrology, Saturn is the planet that regulates all of the energy within our solar system. Saturn rules over the base metal lead. However, this is a metaphor describing how Saturn weighs down the frantic energetic influences of the other planets. Without Saturn, there would be chaos, as all these energies attempt to find form. Saturn provides that form through the influences of Capricorn, making the expressions of energy concrete. This is why Saturn sits so high and is a sacred planet. Our physical world only exists because of the regulation of energies under Saturn's influence. And this is where the Midheaven sits. This is where you truly sit. So it is a combination of the self, combined with our roots in tandem with our ability to be a part of, that makes up the Midheaven, the highest point in the natal chart. However, going back to the 9th divisional chart, one's midheaven might not be on the cusp of the 10th house as it is in the natal chart. The reason for this is that the midheaven still acts as the point in which you yourself carry out the story of your life. But the house in which it sits is a more accurate depiction of exactly what themes you'll deal with the most. This is why, when trying to understand who you are, how others see you, and your underlying function of operation, nothing beats the midheaven in the D9 chart. For this is where the hologram of your reality plays out.
Upon the news, they try to tell us all that